everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of Digging Deeper. This is Brooklyn Hampton, your 2018-2019 State FFA President. And today, I will be interviewing your National Secretary and Louisiana native, Layni LeBlanc. Layni, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
You know, doing good. Living life. All right, so real quick, for a few warm-up questions, describe your dream vacation.
Oh, gosh. I think a dream vacation for me would probably be to Spain, like maybe Barcelona, where it's warm and you can learn a different language and engage in the culture there. Probably Barcelona, I think, is next on my list.
Yeah, I feel like their weather is really, really nice there, and the people would be awesome. Okay, so what has your FFA career been like? Like, how did you get involved in FFA, and where did it all start?
So I don't come from an agricultural background, so joining FFA for me was very unfamiliar. I joined because I wanted to work with animals, and so my mom was like, the only class that your high school offers is agri-science, and so I took it thinking that it would be about farming and about production agriculture and that it wouldn't be for me. But after talking to my ag teacher, she encouraged me, being the academic that I was, to memorize all 5 paragraphs of the creed and do creed speaking. So that was my first introduction to wearing the blue jacket, being an FFA. And it really hooked me because I saw the growth that I'd experienced in FFA and the leadership side, the public speaking side, which really drew me into learning more about agriculture, learning more about agricultural education, and kind of kicked off what would end up being a really long journey in FFA and in leadership.
Right. So you started in the ag classroom and now you're a national officer.
Mm-hmm.
So what does it mean to be a national officer, and what are some of your responsibility as a national officer?
Yeah, national officers take off a year of college if they're enrolled and serve for 1 year, 365 days, and travel about 320 of those days across the country to Japan too for an international experience, really working and engaging with agriculture, agricultural education, and advocating for FFA. And so a lot of those different hats that we'll wear look like giving motivational keynotes, doing workshops with members or with alumni, and then also meeting with our industry sponsors, meeting with people who support agriculture and support the FFA, people that are innovating in the industry, and people that are continuing to want to work in the leadership side. So we play a pretty big role in just being the connector between members and between the industry.
And so you're a national officer, and all of us here in Louisiana are so excited about your year of service. But what was that process like running for a national office, and how did it feel once you realized you were elected, that you got a position?
Honestly, it was a little difficult at first just because we hadn't had a national officer in so long. There weren't a whole lot of resources to learn from or study. But it was definitely that learning process that I valued the most, figuring out who I was and how FFA had impacted my life and what I valued in the organization, and essentially what I wanted to do with this year if I were granted it. And so the process of running is a really cool one because you learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about where your purpose lies and what your values are. And that was probably my favorite part, even though it also tended to be the most challenging. And then actually, as an officer, given the chance to do those things, some of those things that are important to me are making sure that members that don't come from an agricultural background, or members that maybe feel like they're unique or different or have a different perspective on the industry in general, feel like they have a place to belong in the organization, because I've felt that way too. But also valuing and treasuring those folks that do come from production ag, because they're equally as important. So kind of finding that equity piece for members, making sure that they all feel accepted in an organization that does so much for its members. And then also just kind of as we get to travel and experience cultures and learn from people, something that's important to me is being open to those opportunities for learning, and also using those as moments to teach what you do know and where you do come from. So coming from Louisiana, there's a unique perspective there that I get to share with all of the people and a little portion of the 670,000 members that we have. And so I think that's really unique and cool to be able to offer that lens in agriculture and make sure that members feel like they have a voice in it too.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And so travel is like a big part of your job and like a big responsibility that you have. What have you learned about other FFA state associations, and what are some of the main differences between our state and those other states?
Yeah, something honestly that I thought going into this year was that, I would be experiencing something completely different from Louisiana, something completely different from what I knew. But honestly, it's been really cool to see that, like, even as I travel, that there are similarities that I pull from being from home. For example, I was just in Washington State, and I thought that Washington is nothing like Louisiana. But I got there and I realized that, like, Eastern Washington is really similar to Louisiana in the way that the culture operates and just the way the people are. And then Western Washington is the opposite. And so finding those little pieces of similarities were really cool for me to see that, like, I didn't have to leave Louisiana to see differences and similarities, but that I could also see them as I'm traveling, which I thought was cool. And honestly, it's been really cool to just see the differences in agriculture too. Washington had over 300 commodities, and Louisiana has a couple more, like, specialty crops. And so it was cool to be able to talk to members in Washington about, crawfish production, rice production, sugarcane production, whereas they were really passionate about talking about mint production, apple, dairy. And so it's really cool to see how each state kind of has their agricultural powerhouse, and that they champion, and just the impact that they make in that region and what they're able to do in agriculture, but also just with the culture. It was really cool to see urban, rural, wherever you come from, just those similarities and differences that you see here in Louisiana, but also across the country.
So earlier you mentioned that y'all wear a lot of different hats as national officers and that you take on different roles and responsibilities. And I know advocating for agriculture is a really big thing that y'all do, especially since you're so passionate for it.
Oh, yeah.
And so I saw that you were recently in Washington, D.C. What were some, like, really cool things that you got to do at the Capitol?
Yeah, so the National Officer team just spent a week in D.C. with our folks there from National FFA, and we had the chance to, champion a couple of things that our organization is doing, and also share our history and where we've been. So this year marks 50 years of women in FFA, which for me as a woman is very exciting to know that I have a place in this organization because of that. And also marks 50 years of WLC, or Washington Leadership Conference. And so that's where members across the country apply and go to Washington as high schoolers and learn more about advocacy and agricultural literacy. And so those are two landmarks that we got to discuss with folks on the Hill, but also we were able to make some movements in amending our federal charter, which was just signed by the president. And so learning about that and what that flexibility will bring to our organization is really exciting for us. And then we also signed a memorandum of understanding with the Environmental Protection Agency, and what that meant for us was opportunity for members to engage more closely with environmental science, which we're really, really looking forward to, because that is coming to be a forefront of agriculture in the future.
And so national office is something that people dream about, and it's like what you're doing right now. It's one of your realities. And what would you say to somebody that wants to run for state office or national office?
I would say that when you look at a national officer, that they didn't start there, and don't ever think that. That person that is a national officer or is a state officer has had a lot of training, a lot of people pour into them and give them the skills, give them the traits that equip them to be a leader where they are today. And so I guess what I would tell someone who's interested in running is to really chase that opportunity, because I know 9th grade Layni would have never ever considered running for any leadership role or speaking in front of people or really doing anything that meant having to step out of my comfort zone. But because of people like my advisor, because of people in my FFA chapter, I was able to grow, apply for chapter office, and feel more comfortable taking opportunities that I knew would make me uncomfortable, because it was in those opportunities that made me grow as a leader, grow as a person, grow as an FFA member. And so my biggest piece of advice would be to take opportunities and be okay being uncomfortable, because that's where you'll grow the most, and it's where you'll see the most movement happen in your life.
Well, Layni, we want to thank you so much. We are so excited to see what you're doing this year in your service. And for one last question, for our members of the Louisiana Association, your home state, what inspiring words do you have to give them?
I guess I'll share a little something that I share in my keynote that I've been delivering to a couple of states and a couple of members, but it's to dare to design your life. Really take advantage of opportunities to do what you're passionate about, to prioritize what makes you happy and where your interests lie, and to not be afraid of what other people think or say about those things, because it's what you're passionate about that makes you happy and successful. And FFA is an organization that will take you places in the country, outside of it, and it'll take you outside of your comfort zone too. And so whenever you have that design of your life in mind, make sure that you see where FFA fits into it, because it really is a unique organization and that there's something in it for everyone, no matter where that purpose, that passion is. There's a place for you in it, and there's a place for you to grow in it, and I think that's just the coolest thing. So dare to design.